Jacalyn Yvonne, and this is Talkabout. Joining me today is the author of Full Life Balance, The 5 Keys to the Kingdom. Welcome, William Wesley. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jacalyn. I'm glad to be here.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. We want to talk about your book in detail, but before we get started, I want to talk about you a little bit because I was reading your background and I tell you I'm quite impressed.
Thank you
very impressed.
Thank you.
You not only have spent over 25 years in the financial and management industry, but you're also, you have a law degree.
Mm-hmm.
You have, you've worked with the San Francisco Human Rights Commission. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've done so many things. Where does the diverse background come from, and then the impetus to go into so many different avenues and routes like that?
Well, you know, Jacalyn, it's a great question, first of all. What I've realized is most of us have a lot of talents. And when we were children, we said we wanted to be a doctor and a lawyer and an Indian chief. For a lot of us, as we get older, we tend to push down those dreams and focus on one thing. And that's fine if a person feels that that's exactly what they want to do and that works for them. For me, I found I've always wanted to do more. So as I explore one area of myself, and sometimes it triggers another thought, which causes me to do something else. I initially received my undergrad degree, and from there I got my MBA because business fascinates me. But I've always had this interest in law, and one thing led to another. I took the LSAT and decided to go ahead and go to law school to get my law degree. And it gives me an interesting dynamic because I can understand business and a number of things from a number of different perspectives.
Exactly, right, right. So did you ever practice law? Or?
No.
No, okay.
No, I didn't. I received the JD, and I've used it a lot in reference to my business, the development of my book. But also I have this other piece that really has been prevalent in my life, and I mentioned it in the book, and that's that whole charitable piece, where I do charitable activities. I work with youth and education. I've worked for YMCA's, the Human Rights Commission, and that type of thing. And that's sort of what the book is about. It's bringing all of those things together.
Right. But you've also been an instructor. You've taught at the Golden Gate University.
Yes, I have. In fact, I currently do. I'm an adjunct professor there now.
Wow, great.
So what I do, I teach in the undergrad business program. So I teach management courses like management communication and management principles. And
also a public speaker, so you're doing a lot of speaking engagements as well.
Yeah, I talk a little bit.
Well-rounded, so you're one of those persons that actually did go out to become the doctor and the lawyer and the Indian chief almost.
Well, I guess so.
Great. So what we want to do too, and even with all of that, you still find time, it seems like, to play tennis and to sail, so you like boating, and then to be with your family, because you talk about that quite a bit. But it wasn't always perfect for you, because it seems that there was some issues for you in the past that kind of led you to get to the point of this full life balance. So let's talk about where you were before, and then let's bring it to where you're at today.
Excellent. So I'll give you the thumbnail. Born and raised in the Hunters Point projects initially. We moved out and got our own place, and I come from a broken home. Like a lot of my friends, our parents divorced early, but we had a good life and lived well. And my mom remarried extremely well to the man I call father, the late Mr. Bobby Campbell. And he taught us discipline, he taught us self-awareness. This was a man who took us in and showed us how to be men and showed my daughters what a man is like dealing with my mom. So I had a very good foundation in that respect. My mother was an incredible woman, very academically charged, was an RN for 35 years, and then received her master's in psychology the year she retired. So she got her master's when she was 68 years old.
Amazing, wonderful.
But she was the most ardent volunteer I had ever encountered in my life, and I've been around a few years now. So she did the Campfire Girls, she did the Double Rock Baptist Church Career Day, the Baby Hunters Point Boys Club Career Day. She was always doing something in addition to raising the kids and getting her degrees and practicing her profession. So in my household, it was pretty common to expect to not only do things, but do things to help people. So I go out and I get my first degree and I get married and I have my first child, and I basically became very much out of balance. I believe I was in a relationship. I was a bad partner in a bad relationship. It wasn't her fault, it wasn't my fault, it was our fault. And I ended up going through a divorce. And I ended up being without my kids. I really cared and loved them. And I used a lot of excuses, and I became a person who spent more time going out and imagining what could be than working to make what should be. So I actually had an awakening. There was a point in time when I just said, you know what, this is enough. This was not the life I was blessed with. I could be more than this. And I basically asked the Spirit to help me. And there was a night I came home and I just thought about it, and I asked God and I prayed and said, you know, this is not my life. This is not what I want. And I believe I was touched, and I decided the next day, because of that touch, to move my life forward. And over the next few years, I began to pursue my academic abilities. I began to increase my professional abilities, and we can talk about that in detail. I began to interact in a better way with my family. And I began to open back up to all my charitable pursuits. So I created a program for youth. I was elected to be on a number of boards. In other words, I sort of evolved into full life balance after reaching a point where I was relatively successful. I wore the nice suits and I had a little bank account and I managed folks, but I wasn't happy and I wasn't full and I wasn't playing tennis and I wasn't reading and I wasn't pursuing some of the gifts I have. So full life balance is basically saying, what are your gifts, and trying to work to pursue all of those. And it's 5 things. One is, we're spiritual beings. I'm not saying you have to believe in this or that, but there's something spiritual about most folks. Even if you just go to the beach and listen to the waves, there's a peace and a serenity that will come from that. So there's a spiritual component. And then there's also a physical component. It takes energy to be successful. So you have to keep yourself in shape, and they're eating and all of that. Another component is the emotional component. How do you deal with the people you care about? How do you deal from a position of truth and honesty? How do you ask forgiveness and all of that?
Did you do a lot of research, though, to kind of get to this point? How did you discover what these different 5 steps are actually? How did you come to develop the different 5 steps? And I want to talk about each of the steps in detail.
Okay.
So we've gotten 3 of them, but
Okay.
I want you to really go into the different steps in detail and some of the questions that you have people ask themselves, you know, to fit into these different steps and realize whether or not they need some work in these areas. So how did you even get to that point? I mean, it sounds like you evolved, but how did you determine what these steps should be?
That's a good question. Well, I began to just sort of think about it. In the early 90s, when I reached what I consider my pit, and as I became a person who said, okay, there's something better, and I already have it inside of me, and I reached to the Spirit, and the Spirit helped guide me, I began to ask that question. And I realized I was better when I paid attention, at least at some point, to my spiritual self. But that's not all of it. I just can't go to church and pray all day, right? I become even better when I also pay attention to my physical self. So playing the tennis, playing the guitar, reading books, learning new things, and eating right, and getting enough rest, and drinking enough water. But I also became better when I paid attention to my emotional self. So having a relationship and admitting when you're wrong in a relationship. And sometimes I can't do it in the middle of the argument, but stepping away and saying, wait a minute, you know what? That doesn't make sense. It sounded great when I was saying it, but it doesn't make sense. And going back and apologizing and being sincere about that. Having a better, or at least trying to have better relationships with your kids and your parents and all that. And I feel better when I do that. And then the other thing, professionally, I've been blessed with the ability to read and gather information and use that information.
And that's your 4th step, professional.
Right. But it doesn't just mean getting additional degrees. It means making sure my car is tuned up. It means making sure the light switch that keeps flickering at home gets fixed when I see the problem, instead of my wife flicking the switch and getting shocked. It means handling those pieces of my business. It also means vocationally deciding what it is I do best and trying to go after that, because that's what I've been blessed with. And then the last step, I realized charitably, I feel better when I help people. So I began, and all of us do from what I've seen, so I began to do things like going to my old elementary school and talking to the kids in Hunters Point, and going to my old high school, and it evolved into all types of charitable activities. So did I do specific, detailed research? No, but I began to look around at people who I felt pretty much had a clue in terms of their life. And most of those folks had a spiritual base in some context, some type of emotional honesty, some type of way to keep themselves in shape physically, and they did something professionally that they enjoyed, were pleased doing, and get up every day to do, and they also helped people. And I began to slowly but surely put those 5 pieces together, and that evolved into full life balance.
Wow. Interesting. One of the things, too, is that you talk about some of the questions that people ask themselves. You know, how can I be happier? How can I make my life better? And I think that these are questions that everybody asks themselves. You mentioned the seekers, and it sounds like, based upon the readings, that we're all seekers. So why don't you explain that a little bit?
Okay. Well, the seeker is actually 2 things. One, we are all seekers conceptually. But I sort of define a seeker as a person who's seeking and willing to do something about it. I bump into people all the time, and I tell them in the course of conversations that I've written a book. Well, the overwhelming majority of people I say that to say, I've always wanted to write a book. And the secret in writing a book is to begin writing a book. So a seeker is a person who says, okay, at least I'm going to write a page. Or I can be better at something. Maybe I work to get better. A seeker could be a bus driver who's driving the bus, and he's that person when you get on the bus, he gives you a smile and says good morning, because he realizes for him, maybe bus driving is the thing he wants to do. And we need good bus drivers. We need good street sweepers. We need good doctors. What we need is people who get fired up every day to go to their job and do what they do. So back to our bus drivers. He's a bus driver, and that's what he enjoys doing. Then love it. Love it, and every day be the best bus driver, because every time people get on the bus, it will make him feel better because they know he's feeling better, and that's energy happens and people feel good.
I haven't been on a bus in a long time, but I can tell you, if you get on the bus with someone that enjoys what they're doing, your experience is a lot better than that person that doesn't want to be there.
Exactly.
And plus, your life is in danger now. So.
Exactly.
So yes. That's,
and then the converse of that is a person who says, I don't want to drive a bus, but I'm driving a bus. And long term, if a person doesn't want to drive a bus, technically they shouldn't. But I understand bills and I understand necessity. So the point is, if that person's driving a bus and they don't want to drive a bus, well, they should thank the spirit that, first of all, they have a job and they can drive the bus and pay their bills and their family activities. But secondly, they have the money to take the class or the seminar that allows them to be the thing they say they want to do, so while they're sitting there saying, I don't want to drive a bus.
They should become the seeker.
Right.
They should become the seeker.
So seekers tend to go after what they say they want to do. So if you want to improve an aspect in your life and you just want to sit up and talk about it, well, you're technically not a seeker because you're not trying to do anything better. But if you want to improve and you begin to say, how can I be better? Well, seek out people who are doing the thing you want to do and doing it better than you, and see what they're doing. Then incorporate that into yourself.
How do we move people to that point? Because I think that most people want to do something different. Most people that are dissatisfied with their lives, they dream of the lives being different, but where does that motivation come to actually have them take that step to move into becoming an actual seeker, as opposed to this person that's just always talking about, I want to write a book, I want to write a book, and they never write that first page?
And that is the heavy question. That is the question. I had a professor when I was doing my MBA, the late Joe Furrick, and Joe said, long term, people do exactly what they want to do. The only time they change from that is when they want to do something else more than what they're doing. So if a person says to you, I want to be better, well, they don't want to be better enough to try to do something else. So if we continue to do exactly the same thing, then we spend other time in this other piece. And this other piece is called a fantasy high. A fantasy high is when, while I'm driving that bus, just go back to, and again, there's my family and millions of families like mine, the backbone of my family is blue collar work. So that's where we come from. So the bus is just an analogy for the point. So this person, let's take the person who says he's driving the bus but doesn't want to. So he's angry when he's driving the bus. He's not smiling at the folks who get on the bus. He's just sort of, this is messed up, and I see people driving nicer cars, and I'm driving the bus. Well, that person sometimes to get through the day engages in a fantasy, and we all do it. We have different fantasies. If you go to buy a lottery ticket, if you've ever went to buy a ticket, right, you think before you buy the ticket about all these fantasies. You think once you buy the ticket about all these fantasies, you're going to have this house, this car, and all of that. And that's part of the rush, and that's why people buy lottery tickets. In addition to the possibility of winning, it is the fantasy you feel. It's actually a high. And you're releasing dopamine and endorphins into your system, and you're getting high. That happens, and it's natural, and it's human. The problem becomes if your personal circumstance is so bad that you begin to use fantasy highs to get through the day instead of living your life. And if it gets so bad, what you'll end up doing is using sometimes support fantasy high things like drugs and alcohol to make the fantasy last longer. Then you spend time in the fantasy. So instead of driving the bus and just being pissed off about it, this person's driving the bus and spending time thinking about other things they could do if they weren't driving a bus, as opposed to seeking and doing those things. So back to what Professor Furyk said, if the fantasy high feels good enough that the person doesn't think they need to do something else, they will continue to do the same thing until you want to do something more than the thing you're currently doing. You tend to stay in that thing. An object in motion stays in motion, tends to, and an object at rest tends to stay at rest until there's reason enough to move. Wow. And that's the tricky piece because it's inside of the individual. So the question becomes, how bad do you really want to do the thing you say you want to do? And then the answer is, do it.
Wow, that's deep. That is.
That's it.
It is. And it seems so simple, but it's so difficult.
Right.
I mean, when you hear it, it's like, well, this makes sense. It's common sense. Why shouldn't we all be doing this? But it's so difficult, and I just don't understand that.
Well, you know what I found? And with me, I say full life balance is important. I'm not saying I'm there. I'm saying this is aspirational and there are pieces of my life I could be better in. But I am better now than I was, and I try to be better. I try to be a good man. I try to do the right thing. I try to keep myself in shape. I try to do these different things. But I make mistakes. I'm wrong. I have problems. I'm a human. But full life balance says, don't follow William Wesley. Follow an example of trying to be better spiritually, physically, emotionally, and all of that. The other piece it says is, it's a piece at a time. It took a long time to be what you are. Just because you read this book or go to some seminar, you're normally not going to do like that because we are what we are.
You know, when you walk out the seminar hyped up and high and you think you're going to go and do this and you do it for a week and then you're back into your same old
And that's why
stigma.
What we try to do in the book is give specific steps at each component. So there are 5 secrets to spirituality. There are other secrets, I'm sure, but there are 5 things we talk about in terms of your physical self. There are 5 things we talk about in terms of your emotional self. So each one of them, like the charitable self, we say, you stand because people cared enough about you and loved you enough to keep you safe from harm until you could keep yourself safe. And some folks feel an obligation because people have done that to them to give back. Well, I stand because of folks around me who loved me, my parents, but I also was lucky to live in an area that had a village. I had Reverend Victor Medeiros. I had Pete the barber. I had Betty at the candy shop. I had people who made sure I didn't steal, who made sure that if they saw me somewhere, they'd either physically or emotionally thump me on the head, say, hey, right? And kept me safe from myself until I became myself. And because of that, I feel this obligation to give back. But maybe you didn't have that circumstance, but you still had parents who got you to this point.
That's correct.
And because of that, my mother used to say, if we all did a couple of hours a month, we'd solve all the world's problems. So one of the starts, when I get totally inside of myself like we all do, one of the best things I can do is go feed someone at the food kitchen. When you get so wrapped up in the fact that you don't like your job or anything like that, go help someone. And it gives you such incredible perspective. And that might be the first thing you begin to do.
It also makes you appreciate yourself and what you have. When you see others that are struggling, you may think your life is so difficult and unmanageable, but then you see people out there that you are able to help that are a lot worse off. So it does open your eyes to what you actually have that you should be grateful of.
That's an absolute fact.
Yeah. Is your mom still alive? Is she still here?
No, we lost my mom in 2008.
She sounds like such a wonderful person. I would love to have known her. She sounds like someone you'd want as a mentor, you know.
We were very, very lucky. Everyone, if you have a mom, you've been blessed to have a mom. And we were just absolutely blessed. We were blessed to have a mom, a mentor, a professor, a nurse, just someone who did a lot of things. And so she set such a high bar, and she had to do this with 6 kids. It's like, if she can do all of that, I mean, what can I do? Right. And as I tell my kids, I show you, well, my grandmother was incredible, but my mom took all of that, and of course, as the generations go, you get smarter and all of that. So she took what my grandmother had and became her. And that was incredible. But then she gave that to me. So it's in me, so I should be able to do something incredible. And if I do a thing or two, well, my kids, which are part of this line, should be able to do something. I don't say my kids have to write a book, but what I say to them, if you ever meet them, they'll tell you, he says, I show them the minimum they're capable of. It doesn't mean you have to do this, but just do whatever it is you do and blow it out to the best of your ability. And if you,
right. Well, I know you talk about the charity aspect of your book, and I see that as your giving, because actually you've actually written this book, and then you're sharing it now with other people to help them. So I know you're doing a lot of speaking engagements, and you'll be talking about your book and upcoming and a lot of speaking. Is it released now?
Yes,
it's
it
available.
Is. We
okay.
released in March as an ebook on Amazon, on Amazon for Kindle, Barnes & Noble for Nook, and the iBookstore for all Apple products.
Okay.
Then 2 weeks ago, we released as a paperback. So we're in several bookstores in San Francisco,
wonderful.
And you can go to Amazon.com and buy it anywhere.
Right. Well, we'll make sure that your website address is available too for people that want more information about that. And I don't want to date the show, so we won't talk about dates and things like that, because that way we can show it more often.
Okay.
But I know you'll be doing a lot of speaking and whatnot. And so how is this? Where are you at today? How is this all coming together for you with your life and your family today?
Where am I at today? Well,
and where do you want to go?
Where do I want to go? I think it's important. I think because of all the stresses and factors we face, I can get on an elevator anywhere. I've been in a number of cities, and if you say good morning to people, if it's a Monday, 90% of the time, it's a grunt or a complaint about Monday. 1 out of 10 times people say, yeah, it's a good day. And then Tuesday is a little bit better. Wednesday, it's hump day. If I can just get over this day. Thursday, a little better, because now I can slide to Friday. Then Friday, this is the day we've almost been waiting for, but it's really Saturday. And then Saturday, you do whatever it is you want to do. Then Sunday, by 3 o'clock, you begin to think about Monday. And that vicious cycle starts again. So people who live on that treadmill basically live or anticipate living about 2.5 days a week. I think this is very important because every day I wake up charged. And the reason I wake up charged is I've been able to develop perspective. I wake up, I can step, I can walk, and I have this mind. I've been able to do things and use it. So, and you can ask my wife, ask my kids, that's how I am. I've had bad days. I lost my dad, I lost my mom, I lost my grandmom, and there's going to be some tragedy in every family, in every life. But as I mentioned in the emotional section, I started with, I feel good, James Brown, right? Because I feel good 360 plus days a year. And when I come across so many people who don't, and I think a lot of it has to do with broken dreams, unfulfilled expectations, and the inability to go after what they say they want to go after. And I think about being a kid. I think about how I felt as a kid. And I felt, even though apparently we were poor, we were poor, right? And I can tell stories to people who say they're not poor. I said, no, you had that. I was talking to my wife, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but we were talking about dinner. And she mentioned that her siblings all liked the chicken breast, and there were a large number of them, just like there was a large number of us. And she said, well, my sister got the breast, and another person, and 4 people got the breast. I said, how can 4 people have the breast? She said, we had 2 chickens sometimes. I said, you had 2 chickens? Right?
Right.
I can eat any part of the chicken.
They were eating very well, right.
There were 6 of us, we had 1 chicken. But so that type of thing, I come from that. And with that kind of perspective, all of this is gravy. But even if I didn't have a penny or 2, and even if I didn't have all of that, this kind of perspective helps you get better. And I think most people are essentially okay. They just need help to be a little bit better in each area.
Yes, because they are trapped in that cycle. And, and when you mention it in the content that you have, it's very depressing, you know, that you see that this is how you're living, you know, particularly when you're not happy with it, you know, and you're still dreaming, you know, and we're going to all dream, even though we're successful. I'm sure you still have your ongoing dreams, you
That's
know, and
part of it.
those goals, you know, you steadily have create new goals, but you know, to just be in that cycle and be trapped there, that's tough, you know.
Yes, it
that's
is.
tough, and life is tough right now. So, where do you want to go with your speaking and your book? You know, what do you want to see happen in the future? And I think we have maybe about 3 minutes left.
Where I want to go, I want to expose people to full life balance. We're in the process of translating it into Chinese. We're about 40% through. We will be in China by the end of the year. We're going to translate it into Spanish. My interns, I was lucky enough to, as a professor, I wrote a paper to the school saying, wouldn't it be a kick if we marketed or went through the marketing and publishing of a product like a book using non-traditional means like social networking. So my interns helped me realize that when you come out with something like this, if you price it at $24.99, most folks won't buy it. So we priced this thing at the price of a lunch, right? A burger and fries and shake. It's priced at less than $10. So what we priced it at is a point where most people can buy it and read it. We think it's a good, easy read. It's filled with analogies and stories and metaphors, and it's real. But it's also a tribute to family, to spirit, and to what can happen if you go after those things. But we also think it's a reference document. In the professional section, when we talk about an estate plan, how you should have a will and a trust and a medical directive and a power of attorney. We talk about the Rule of 72 and how do you set up your money and asset allocation. We talk about life insurance. So we talk about things that people can go back and look at.
Right. If people want to get in touch with you, how would they contact you? If they want more information about you or your book, or
they can go to the website.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
go to the website.
Why don't you share that website?
www.fulife, and then the word balance, BALANCE.com. So it's fulllifebalance.com, but it's F-U-L, only one L.
Okay, great.
I-F-E,
We'll
balance.
make sure that that's on the screen as well.
Good.
And so, well, you know, I tell you, it's when you're having a great time and you have a great guest, time flies, and it has actually flown away.
It has flown.
So it was a pleasure having you. We did not touch on your book. I mean, it's a lot of information, so we may have to have you back sometime in the future. But again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
I appreciate the time.
Okay, then. Great. And also, thank you for joining us. And until next time, this has been Talkabout. Thank you.